Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's CTI Transition Tips. Today's session is our last in our Transition Tips series. We hope you have enjoyed them as much as we have enjoyed creating them. If you missed any, please visit CTI's Facebook, Twitter, or website to watch recordings of our previous sessions. My name is Stephanie Lau, and I am a Transition Training Associate at VCU Center on Transition Innovations, and this is my colleague, Chris.
Hello, I'm Chris Parthemos, and I'm a career training specialist at CTI.
For today's session, Chris and I will be giving you some tips on how to prepare for post-secondary education or higher education at home. I think when many young people think about life after high school, they think about going to college. This is a big transition that can be both exciting and scary for students and their families. Making and having a plan is a great way to ease some of those anxieties. Also, when making that plan, keep in mind that college can look very different for different people, and it's important to choose the best path for you. So today, Chris and I will share some ideas on how to research, plan, and execute your path towards post-secondary education.
Thanks, Stephanie. So the first tip that we want to share with you is a really important one, and that's to make sure that you have your career goals in mind when you start to think about college, and particularly to think about the kind of education that you're going to need in order to start to make those goals happen. So you'll want to ask yourself, what job do I want when I graduate? What do I want to do? This will start to guide what you need to get out of college. Different careers expect you to have different kinds of degrees or different kinds of licenses. For example, many electricians have a special certificate that they get from a trade school. Certified nursing assistants have a special certificate as well, but they get that from a 2-year associate degree. Teachers usually have a master's degree, and doctors have to have an MD. Once you have a career in mind, there's a few ways to decide what kind of degree you're going to need. First, you could ask someone who already has that job. This is also a good opportunity to learn from them what it's like to be in that field. Second, you can use the internet as a resource. The website talentdesk.com has a great career finder tool that gives information about the different degrees needed for different jobs. It might be a good idea to think about the entry-level jobs in your career field and what they require. For example, teachers require master's degrees, but teachers' assistants usually do not.
That's right. And some jobs might also let you work while you earn your degree. I went to school to earn my master's degree and teaching certificate while I was teaching.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, I was able to do something really similar while I was working towards my license. I was able to work in a entry-level job in the same field, and I was still working towards my degree at the same time. So you might be able to find, with a little bit of research from your home computer, a job that you can have while you're working towards your eventual career.
So once you've researched what kind of education is required for your career, it's time for our next tip. Research your college options. First, start with what is most important to you and make a list of those requirements. If your career goal has very specific educational requirements, what colleges have the necessary academic programs? Your educational requirements may also determine what type of college you attend. For example, community college and an associate's degree may be the best fit, or you might need to or want to attend a 4-year college.
Yeah, you know, I think that's a really interesting point is what you need and what you want. And that's such an important conversation to have with yourself and with your family. You know, every college is a little bit different and every family is a little bit different. So thinking about not just your career goals, but also your personal needs as far as where things are located and how far away you are from your family is really important.
Mm-hmm. So depending on what you need or want, you may also want to consider some non-degree post-secondary options like apprenticeship or comprehensive transition and post-secondary programs too. They may end up being the best fit. Other things to consider when making your list might be location, size, and whether it's a private or public institution. For example, I wanted to go to a small public school, so I did. If you're in Virginia, Virginia Wizard is a great site to search college options. We suggest picking your top 3 schools and conducting further in-depth research on them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Doing the research is really important. And so one of the most important ways to do that is to get a chance to figure out the layout of the campus and where everything is. So once you've started to look at all of the options and narrowed down your choice, it's a good idea to get familiar with the campus of the college you think you're going to attend. If you're not able to go to campus physically, it's okay. Most schools have virtual tours available. Every college is a little bit different, but there's two main resources you should look for. There are virtual campus tours and virtual information sessions. Virtual tours will show you the map of the campus so that you can start to learn the layout and get some pictures of different buildings and features. This will help you learn what the campus looks like and where you can go to get the things that you need. Information sessions with faculty or even other students can give a lot of different information about the college and give you a sense of what it's like to be there. These are a great way to learn what college is like. As we said, every college is a little bit different, and taking a tour or going to an information session, these are great ways to learn if it's the best fit for you. As you start to learn about your college, you'll also start to see that college is going to be a lot different than high school.
Like Chris said, college campuses can look very different from high school. It's important to be prepared for those differences in order to plan for success in college. So our next tip is review the differences. Not only will campus be bigger, your college classes may be bigger too. You may have class less frequently, have less interaction with the instructor, and your grade might be determined by just a few assignments. You will decide when and where to have your own meals. You won't have a lunchtime scheduled for you. So interview a teacher, family member, or friend to learn what they thought were the biggest differences between high school and college.
Yeah, that experience and that transition is so different for everyone. For me, I went from a very small private high school to a very large public campus. And, it took 30 minutes to get from one end to the other. And I went from having only 100 people in my graduating class to a graduating class that was about 3,000 or 4,000 other students. So, talk to your family and your friends about what their experiences were like and think about what yours will be.
One thing that's really fun about college is that you have a lot of freedom, and that can be really exciting. But remember, that also means that you have more responsibility to structure your own time. So check out some resources from CTI and Think College on the differences between high school and college. Now, one very important difference that you need to know is that IDEA, the law that governs special education in high school, does not apply to college. This means that any accommodation you receive in college will depend on your individual need and your own self-advocacy. Accommodations in college may be different from what you received in high school, so make sure you understand what accommodations are provided and how to access them.
That's right. So our next tip is to make a list of your accommodation needs. Now, as Stephanie was saying, you may have had some accommodations in high school, and if you did, you probably want those to continue into college. You might also be thinking, knowing, as we've said, that college is so different, you might need some new accommodations in college that you hadn't used before. As Stephanie mentioned, the IDEA doesn't apply to colleges in the same way that it does to high schools. So you'll need to start thinking about taking an active role in asking for what you need. So the first thing that you'll want to do that is make a list of the accommodations you'll need for college. There's a couple different ways you can keep track of that information. If you prefer to use a computer, you can have a Word document, or if you like a pen and paper, you can get a piece of paper or a notebook and write them down there. So a good place to start is with those accommodations that you had in high school. You can check your IEP, and on that separate piece of paper or Word document, you can write down any accommodations that you had before. This could have been anything from extra time or a separate room while you were testing to something like a screen reader that helps you with your textbooks. You might also start to think about some of those differences that we learned about between high school and college. And if some of those things are things that you might need a little bit of support with, you can write that down on that same list. And once you have that list, you should make contact with the school's accessibility office. On some college campuses, that office will be the Student Accessibility Office. Other campuses may call it something like Disability Support Services. But as we've said, the IDEA doesn't apply the same way in college. So in order to get these accommodations, you'll need to be able to show that office some documentation of your need for them.
Yeah. So just like Chris shared, that it's extremely important to review your IEP. So having that document and many other documents handy will be helpful when preparing and applying for college. So tip number 6, keep track of important documents. Throughout your college career, you will likely need to refer to your IEP, financial records, previous and current coursework, and medical information. We suggest that you get the help of a family member or another support individual to help you create an organizational system that you can maintain throughout college. When I was in college, I kept a folder of these important documents so that I knew where to look when I needed something. And you may want to consider a binder with labeled tabs for education, medical, and finance and financial forms to start to organize your documents. That's something you can do right now, today, at home. And as you progress through college, add important documents to the system like accommodation letters and transcripts.
Yeah, I think it's so important to stay organized, especially with this documentation, and think about the organizational system that works for you. So Stephanie mentioned that she likes to keep that physical record, but I prefer to stay kind of digital with all of my records. So I like to scan things in and put them in a folder on my computer or in an external hard drive so that I can keep track of things digitally.
Yeah. The most important thing is that you find a system that works for you. But just like Chris said, he likes to use technology skills to stay organized. So this is also a great time to start working on those technology skills. Think about creating a system online. It could be something like Google Drive or Trello, and it could also be something where a family member can help you monitor and keep track of things.
Yeah, so you probably started to see as you were looking at some of the differences between high school and college that college is a lot bigger than high school. Because your classes are bigger, because the campus is bigger, you might need to rely on technology to communicate with your professor. Or, as Stephanie said, you might need technology to help you keep your system organized. So, with that in mind, there's a few different kinds of technology you might want to learn some more about. The first is communication tools. Getting comfortable with email or with things like Blackboard that your school may use to organize their academic information, that will help you succeed in college. So you can start to practice right now at home. Work on it all through the summer. You can practice sending emails. You can watch some videos on Blackboard or whatever system like that your school uses. And if you're worried about spelling or grammar, you can download some spelling check tools like Grammarly. Second, you can think about starting to organize your schedule. You can learn a tool like Google Calendar or a different schedule keeping tool if you want to keep track of your time. You can also download apps on your phone, tablet, or computer that will help you keep checklists of what you need to do, like Todoist. In general, college is a lot more about self-management than high school. Think about what you need support with. There's probably an app for that. ThinkCollege.net has a helpful list of these tools called Tech Tools for College Prep. But remember that technology, while very helpful, isn't the only way to keep track of what you need.
We mentioned before that college comes with a lot of freedom and responsibility. To help you stay organized and to organize your time, tip number 8 is practice self-management skills. Unlike in high school, there's no tardy or warning bell. No one will make sure you get to the right class on time, and missing deadlines might mean failing a class. Use a calendar to track your daily schedule as well as events and appointments. I highly suggest setting a daily routine and checking your calendar part of that routine. This is something you can do today at home. Start figuring out what is the best routine that you need in order to stay organized. Again, find a system that works best for you. Some people prefer paper calendars and others prefer to use electronic calendars. I personally put all of my work and personal appointments on Google Calendar. I then invite my coworkers and my family to these appointments so they can help me keep track of my schedule. Incorporating technology like setting reminders and alerts on phones is another great way to stay on top of your schedule. I actually have alerts on my phone to remind me when it's trash day or recycling day.
Yeah, that's a really good example, Stephanie. I do the same thing. And I got a little creative with it because I was finding that I really still needed some extra reminders. And I have a little watch. It's a little Fitbit, and it has some notifications on it. And having that physical vibration, like right here on my wrist, is really helpful for me. And if I didn't have that, I'd probably be late to every meeting.
Another difference between high school and college that will require self-management skills is timing your travel. College campuses can be very large, and you may need to ride a bus to get from one class to another. So don't forget to consider travel time when scheduling appointments.
That's exactly right. So one of the key challenges that a lot of students face when they're just starting college is learning how to get around campus. As I said earlier, I went to a very large campus and it took about 30 minutes to walk from one end to the other. So I needed to start to think about the bus schedules and I needed to keep track of all of that information. Now, you may have already started thinking about this if you did take a virtual tour in tip number 3, but let's start thinking about some other ways to improve your navigation skills. First, you'll want to get comfortable with a map. Google Maps is a great option, but you can also use a printed map of your campus if that's what you'd prefer. You can use that map to help you find out how long it will take to get from place to place.
That is so important, Chris, knowing how long it takes to get to class. When I was in college, I had to keep that in mind when I scheduled my class schedule. Because if I didn't, I would forget sometimes and schedule a class on one end of campus and another one right afterwards on the other end of campus, and I would have to run across campus because we were very small and we didn't have a bus system. And it's never fun to get to class late and sweaty and hot.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I can remember being on the far end of campus and having to get all the way across campus because the bus was late or I hadn't learned the schedule properly yet. And, running through over the highway, over 20 minutes worth of hills and all of that stuff and in nice clothes to go to class, it does get very sweaty. So Google Maps, as we said, can give you walking directions, but it can also give you directions for bus routes, depending on what you need to get where you're going. Your college campus map may also show bus stops if the campus is large enough that students use buses to travel. Once you have these maps, and once you've used them to decide how you're going to get from place to place, you can use them to learn where to go. You can practice using those maps to help you get around before you start. If you haven't used Google Maps or a similar map tool before, you can practice at home by making a map of your neighborhood and practicing using Google Maps to move around. You'll be much more comfortable after you've had a chance to try it out. Navigating campus is just one of the things you'll have to plan for this fall. As you start to do all that, it might be a good idea to write down the things that you've been planning for. You can write down your navigation plan, you can write down your accommodations, you can write anything that you're thinking about down now.
All of our tips are something that you can start today. While you're still in high school, it's never too late, which leads us to our final tip. Write out a plan, just like Chris suggested. It will take time to complete all the tips we have shared today, so organize your path to college by developing a plan of activities. Set deadlines and goals for yourself on when you want to accomplish certain tasks. For example, research on careers and educational programs should be done first and can be done at any time. If you're at home, use the internet. If you want to start interviewing people, you can call up a friend or an old teacher. Whereas in-person college visits may be best planned for the summer or early fall. If you will need help identifying your accommodations or securing important documents, add who you will contact and when to your plan. Talk to your teachers and family members about practicing technology, self-management, and navigation skills at school and at home. It's never too early to start those skills. A tip sheet will be available after today's session. Print it out and make a plan for each tip. Your plan is not limited to the tips we've identified here today. The coursework you take in high school can prepare you for college classes. So you might want to consider talking to a school counselor or a transition coordinator. You may want to include extracurricular activities like clubs, sports, volunteering, or employment to make you a more attractive college applicant.
Yeah, and I hope that as you've worked through all of these tips, you started to see a recurring theme, which is that all of these things, it's down to what works for you, down to your strengths, your interests, and the support that has worked for you in the past. So think about those things and make a plan that's your plan. We want to thank you so much for tuning in today and joining us. We hope that all of these tips have been helpful to you and that you feel more prepared now for college. As we said at the beginning, this has been our final Thursday Transition Tip Facebook event, but don't worry. We will continue to provide relevant transition-related content, resources, and support. For additional transition information and resources, don't forget to visit the CTI's website and sign up for our weekly news blasts. Also, you can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for more information. Thank you so much. Goodbye.